The parasitic origins of Nemesis explained, how the T-103s became Nemesis, Resident Evil 3 lore by Roanoke Gaming.
So yeah, just gonna go check out this wall over here and answer the phone. Oh my god, what is that? This behemoth creature breaking through the wall is what is affectionately known as Nemesis, because it will remain on your tail and a complete nemesis to you if pointed in your direction, no matter where you may run or where you may hide. This hulking beast is a combination of Umbrella USA and Umbrella Europe's work into creating the perfect BOW. But what combination is this, and where might we specifically see Umbrella Europe's work later? Well, let's cover that in today's episode over Nemesis. But let me ask you a question. Do you want to get swole enough to take a Nemesis on by yourself? Well then, my guy, you're gonna need yourself a good pair of earphones. That out of the way, the question mainly is, what is Nemesis? The creation of
Yo, wait, what? What happened there? I didn't skip. That was a Raycon ad read, right?
a good pair of earphones. That out of the way, the
Interesting. I wonder why that got edited out. Because I know you can go into YouTube Studio, and I know you can edit stuff out. That's super interesting. I'm 90% sure there used to be a Raycon out there. That's interesting.
question mainly is, what is Nemesis? The creation of a Nemesis is a story of extreme trial and error and working with incomplete pieces of data. Umbrella Pharmaceuticals' ultimate goal for this project was to create something capable of being sold to the US Army. With this, they plan to use the money to start creating the perfect humans, or what could be considered perfect under their definition. As Umbrella continued to work on this project, eventually they would create a T-virus, which was seen as a possible selling point. The issue was, however, due to degradation within the human brain, this would heavily affect the intellect of the person, decreasing their copacetic nature and ultimate rendering of them being just shambling beasts. This would mean they were essentially uncontrollable. During these projects,
Well, except that what is it? The T-virus in a very small number of people actually has beneficial superhuman mutations. But it's only for like the select chosen few, which is what leads into say like RE5 design philosophy of, Spencer, I was to become a god, the progenitor virus, yada, yada, yada. Because Wesker was infected with the T-virus, was he not? Albert Wesker, I don't remember if he had the progenitor virus in him or not. I don't remember that part about early RE lore. He was obviously one of the Wesker children. I think as one of the Wesker children, him and Alex got infected with the progenitor virus at a young age, and because they took to it, they were the Wesker children. And that allowed him, I guess, to interact with the T-virus in a certain way. But even then, we see beneficial mutations of what the Crimson Head, the LICKERS is. We get to see some kind of beneficial mutations. But you could absolutely argue that cognizance is lost in some situation, right? Progenitor was in Wesker. Okay, yeah. But he got the T-virus in 3 as well. And then he even got Ouroboros in 5, which 5 is still canon for better or worse, whatever your opinion is, because Resident Evil Nick Cage Heisenberg did say that boulder punching a-hole. I love him. That line lives rent free in my head. That rent has a second mortgage paid off in my head. Good God. He's going somewhere with this. But it's interesting to see that the Any-Alpha parasite was kind of the fix to this, addressing a parasite into the mix, which, if anything, you could argue led into just certain design philosophy elements for RE4. But I could also be giving them too much credit, because I heard that the story was written allegedly in 24 to 48 hours, and then you had the RE4 Castle demo, which was more like a haunted, spooky kind of experience. And then you ended up having a shift to what current Resident Evil 4 is. But even then, playing through Resident Evil 3 Remake and seeing that the Any-Alpha parasite and parasitical influences could heavily influence perspective going into 4 and 5. It was interesting to see.
breakthroughs were made as such as with the Hunter Project, which we saw firsthand down in the sewers what they can do to a human if they get too close.
Right.
But those were literal animals and had too many weaknesses and flaws to be considered as sellable. So Umbrella held out for something that had none of the flaws, but at minimum human-like intelligence, if not on par with human intelligence. Enter the Tyrant Project. The Tyrant Project's ultimate aim was to create human mutants without loss of intelligence. As Umbrella USA worked towards this end, Umbrella Europe would instead choose to look into parasites for the answer. These parasites would take over the function of the brain, creating a being who is as intelligent as a human.
So this being Umbrella Europe does make sense, because did Luis Serra, I think this was a remake specific clarification. I don't know if this was an original. I know Luis Serra was part of Umbrella, or did work for Umbrella. I don't know if he was involved to the same capacity, because wasn't Luis Serra on the Nemesis project, and knowing where Luis Serra came from, right? Valdolobos, right? The village in Resident Evil 4, knowing that he came from there and that Las Plagas was around there, it makes it suddenly a more logical conclusion to start introducing a parasite like that. I don't know what the Any-Alpha parasite is. I don't think it has any relation to Las Plagas as far as I'm aware, but it's very interesting that the remake does allude to a lot heavier his involvement with Umbrella being in Europe and his close approximation to Los Illuminados and Las Plagas. That is interesting.
The two parts standing alone would run into problems and would reach impasses. The Tyrant project would not have a successful creation until the completion of the T-002, and the Nemesis project had every host perish, as none could actually survive this procedure. At this point, the USA team was feeling pretty good about the T-002s until a small police team showed up and decimated them by taking out the failed and outdated prototypes of the T-002 itself. After this, it became evident that there was going to be no great future for the T-002s if cops could just take them out. So they put the T-103s out the door toward Umbrella Europe to restart the Nemesis project. These test subjects at this point were considered useless to some degree and were experimented on. More specifically with the NE-alpha parasite. Having these implanted into their bodies, it would take over the brain functions and thus the host. Alarmingly to the scientists, however, two Nemesis T-types gained an ego and a sense of self-awareness and made an attempt to escape the laboratory. This indicated that these experiments were much smarter than previously seen. So how did Nemesis end up in Raccoon City? Well, considering Umbrella had, a massive underground lab in the city, once they saw the outbreak happening, they viewed this as a good way to establish a sort of proof of concept. They began sending over the BOWs to take advantage of this crisis. UBCS were to engage the BOWs, and monitors throughout the city were to report and record the BOWs' combat skills to verify their reliability in open conflict. Umbrella also remembered that the STARS members who had attempted to take out their research previously, so they put a Pursuer-class Nemesis on them, and then showed this Nemesis the photos of the surviving team members. It was instructed to take out the remaining members and was given a rocket launcher to show its proficiency with tools at its disposal. And we're also going to figure out if I was able to sneak past something that might be monitoring this channel here in a moment, so I'll let you guys know how that went. And this is where we officially get into Resident Evil 3. Well, the remake anyways. The remake ended up retconning a few things, so my intentions are to stick with this line of lore, as this is the most recent and intended canon of the series. If you haven't played,
I don't know if there was an edit there or not. I actually don't know if something got passed. I don't know. Interesting. The Raycon edit, I'm 90% sure there was a Raycon thing earlier.
The game, let me give you the briefest of rundowns. You are stalked throughout the entire city by a giant monster worse than Mr. Fedora Man who stalked Leon. This relentless beast appears to be more powerful than a T-103 and better at tracking due to its increased intelligence. But also it has the ability to mutate and change in response to damage, just like a certain Dr. William Birkin. Interesting. But we'll get to those mutations soon. So there are three main mutation stages for the Nemesis: humanoid, quadrupedal, and blobfish. Let's tackle each one and the surrounding events that push this creature towards its mutation over time. At the beginning, this thing relentlessly hunted Jill Valentine. Tracking her all over the city, there was really not much she could do against it besides sort of just run in the opposite direction. But even while doing that, the creature's strength that it possessed was unimaginable. Able to jump down from seemingly nowhere, which was presumably the rooftops, it never injured itself in the process. And it also possessed tools at its disposal which could take her out at a moment's notice. All it would take is for her to get knocked down, and this creature would then bring its boot down on her in one fell swoop, completely crushing her skull. So in order to actually do this tracking and seeking, the Nemesis needs intellect far beyond its predecessors. The humanoid form, and subsequently every other form, is reliant upon the parasite within the body. Shortly after injection of the infant cellular form of parasite into the T-103s, parasite would then move up to the brainstem of the creature and attach itself. As they mature, they would slowly eat through the brainstem, connecting to the rest of the brain. There seems to be a common theme with sort of like being stuck inside your own head, because the brain was then isolated to just the skull, and the parasites will become the new brain for the Nemesis.
I mean, we see this in nature as well, right? There's what is it? It's the parasite that is just in lakes. I can't remember what it's called. I know it's the infamous one that if you get it and it actually swims up to your brain, because it goes, I think it enters through your nose. Like it is a certified game over moment. Like it buries itself in your brain. Like, and we see this in nature. This is arguably a cinematic extreme version of natural concepts like that. But I mean, we do see things like this in nature. This is one of those where reality is truly stranger than fiction. There's definitely parasites, interactions, etc. that in reality, I'm sure are definitely weirder than some things in here. There's a line of logic that these follow, even if they're more cinematic and more shocking, so to speak. It's super interesting.
The parasites possess their own intellect and human-level intelligence, so they finally free the, I guess, less intelligent organ, which was the brain, from the brainstem, and then they officially completely take over the body of the Nemesis. Due to this, problem-solving abilities increase once more, as does self-awareness and rational thinking. The body of a humanoid Nemesis, in terms of height, is roughly about the same as a Tyrant. Standing about 7 feet 3 inches or 2.21 meters tall, this beast towers over any other human. The skin color of a Nemesis is due to a chemical reaction of the alpha parasite. This brown staining and corroded tissue appears to be in direct conflict with the secretions, leading to its degradation, but its healing factor allows it to retain skin. Ironically, it appears that the secretions are also a part of this healing factor, or are really this healing factor, so they're sort of breaking down the skin, but then they're also building it. Concerning the actual morphology of the Nemesis, it appears very much so to stem from being a human being. That said, the parasite has had some drastic effects on it, as well as the Tyrant project. It's sort of hard to pinpoint exactly where each morphological trait comes from, but if you want to kind of like make your own comparisons, I do have a video over Mr. Explained, nailed it, which I will link at the end. That said, we can see that they are roughly the same height, likely the same strength as a Tyrant, but the healing factor is something Mr. X did not appear to have, as he was taken out by Birkin. Nemesis does actually appear to have this healing factor because of the parasite, which has changed him on a cellular level, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say I think Nemesis could totally wreck Dr. Birkin, but regardless of that, this may explain the gigantic teeth. This would say to me there are a few things.
I honestly think he's right on this, though. Like, I was just thinking of Nemesis versus Birkin. I think Nemesis just hands down beats anything prior to G3. Like G1, G2, I think Nemesis just stomps. Once we get to G3, it's really still it's still kind of a toss-up. I think G3 has the best chance against it. I think Nemesis might have more cognizance and control and fine motor skills. G4, I think maybe Nemesis gets bodied, but then we go into Nemesis Phase 2. I think Nemesis Phase 2 just wipes G4 and G5. I think that Nemesis will come out more often than not on top.
Going on, but we will get to that momentarily. So first, let's talk about just the overall powerhouse that Nemesis is. Nemesis possesses a superhuman strength, which has given him the ability to leap great heights, as well as smash through apartments, floors, buildings in general, lift cars. So you can kind of imagine what he can do to your body with just a kick. This also has given him the ability to lift tools that are usually strapped and bolted down to vehicles. The strength also translates into speed. The humanoid Nemesis, as well as the quadrupedal, can easily outrun any human. Its bulky appearance may make you think it should be slower, but due to all this strength, it is able to appropriate the muscle strength to make it faster. This gives the prey much less time to react, and in turn, Nemesis chooses to run at opponents head on and bludgeon them to their end. But with these two abilities, I mean, that's great and all, but without durability, it would be useless. Think of it as like a glass cannon scenario. But much like the other Tyrants, Nemesis can ignore direct hits to his body and head. And considering the brain is no longer in control, this is completely understandable why he can take, I don't know, any hit to the head and be perfectly fine. And this is because taking out the brain of the Nemesis does nothing, besides maybe affect its ability to see, but the brain is no longer running the show, so the parasites are all over the body, and those are what's actually kind of piloting it, I guess you could say. So that said though, with enough concussive force imparted into its body, it will stun it, but it will not take it out, concerning what you can actually hold. So we can see that these parasites in its body actively come out during a chase scene with Jill Valentine, and these parasites have the ability to manipulate large portions of the body and create long tentacles used to grab and hold onto humans around him. And these tentacles further increase the lethality of this beast, as it can use these to grasp onto objects, helping it climb. And this
So we bring up a good point here as well, where in the Regenerators in 4, we kind of see how it's especially because how they can, like, you know, comically extend their arms. How you have Plaga that will they kind of have tendrils, little tentacles between, you know, bones and stuff, like how it kind of permeates the entirety of some of the Las Plagas BOWs. I wonder if, because not only do we have the tentacles from the Any-Alpha parasite here that can have enough finesse and strength to quite literally catch a rocket, right? Like I was seeing here. But I wonder, you know, contrary to what the Regenerators in 4 do, where they can, you know, kind of extend their proportions, or they can kind of, you know, use those little tendrils to kind of heal up, you know, when you blow, say, the top of it off, right? I wonder if they're used to structurally reinforce bones, joints, muscles, like if they're additive in that capacity. So, you know, while it jumps off a building and has microfractures on its bones, you know, being able to have healing factor, osteoblast, right, kicking into overdrive to kind of heal that and strengthen it, I wonder if it can do certain things because there are like smaller tentacles that are able that interweave between around bones and stuff like that to help structurally reinforce it.
Also might explain why we always see him kind of appearing on rooftops out of nowhere. These same parasites also affect the mitotic pathways within the body, increasing its ability to heal, and due to its training, it's a skilled combatant to boot. But alright, let's get into how this thing actually heals, because I know what you guys are really here for, and that is the science. I mean, I'm sure the sultry sounds of my voice are just perfect, but let's just go ahead and move on. So seeing that this parasite exists all throughout the body, these secretions are likely a form of MPF, or maturation promoting factor. The proteins responsible are CDK1 and cyclin B. Essentially, these will activate the mitotic pathways within cells and lead to rapid cellular division. This is secreted all over the body, but it would also appear it can be localized. Having this secretion factor in areas of damage after an engagement with Jill leads to the ability for it to keep pushing and tracking. In other areas, such as jumping off buildings, this would more than likely cause little microfractures within the bone, so this would activate the osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are responsible for bone formation and are prevalent during fractures. So, like I said, I would assume the laws of physics still apply, so that much force imparted into bones, as well as the concussive force and absorption from, like, say, a grenade, would mean that the body would need to heal rapidly to maintain integrity. So I know what you're saying, so Roanoke, with the mitotic pathways all activated, is this really any different from cancer? Well, you'd actually be right. Judging by the teeth and skin degradation, it does appear that Nemesis is about just on the cusp of certain bone cancers, as well as continued growth. The skin looks straight up melanoma, meaning there are some issues, but the reason it's not a massive cancer, which we will see later, is likely due to an inhibitor to the mitotic pathways being released as well. Because healing is great, but uncontrolled healing is more damaging than anything. We can actually see that this unchecked healing after major damage is presented. When Mikhail detonates the C4 on the train to take out Nemesis, this coupled with all other engagements sends him into a heavily damaged state. He ends up stumbling out of the train station later and falling into the river. Here is where the T-virus begins to rear its ugly head. Due to Nemesis being infected with T-virus, but more specifically the parasite, kind of causes these things to work in conjunction. Parasite appears to be able to heal the body, but is unable to maintain a humanoid state. The regenerative abilities go
I mean, yeah, actually, now that I look at it again, because I definitely was like very xenomorph-esque, does this not just present itself as a giant LICKERS, or LICKER? Does it not present itself as just an advanced state of that? Because we have the Crimson Heads that are infected with the T-virus in 1, that evolve into LICKERSs, and then we have, well, in 5 we had the beta forms of those that were pretty bulky. Does this not look at least similar enough to a giant reinforced LICKER? Interesting, well, especially because that pairs into the Nemesis is a hunter. It has the intelligence. Its directive is stars, right? And so it's going to go after stars. It is a hunter for all intents and purposes. It's also been very fascinating to go back and see Nemesis, and I guess Mr. X by extension as well. And then you look at a game like Dead Space with the Hunter from 1, Ubermorph from 2, Regenerators in 3, or Alien Isolation even, where you look at, you know, the alien that's kind of around. Horror games that have those things that kind of hunt you around. Even Jack from RE7, right? And you can kind of see those roots in like Mr. X and Nemesis. It's very fascinating when you look at it from a design standpoint where certain concepts could be originating. So this reads to me, now watching this, as a giant LICKER. This 100% reads as the T-virus evolutionary pathway, I guess the beneficial evolutionary pathway leading to that mutation, coupled with the Any-alpha parasite to retain intelligence and also increase its reach and healing factor. That's interesting.
Wire and completely changed this creature to a more animalistic origins. So much like when William Birkin started becoming more beast-like over time after injecting the G-virus, the changes to the physical form of Nemesis also appears to be quite high. And here's where we can officially start with the feet, because we could have, I guess, with the humanoid, but I mean, it's just a foot. So we see with this particular mutation, it has completely changed them. Continuing with the almost cancerous levels of bone growth, the big toe strangely hasn't grown as much as the others have, but is it really that strange, and why is this the case? Well, within mammals, there's something called a dew claw. The dew claw usually resides higher up on the foot than the other 4 toes, being longer and actually making contact with the ground. Well, so the other 4 toes make contact. The dew claw never makes contact, and it's called dew claw because when they walk through the grass, it gets wet by dew. So just like any other animal, the foot has a digitigrade structuring, and as a result is much longer with the heels never touching the ground. The trench coat originally worn is now in tatters, and I have been told by others this has the added effect originally of controlling mutations within the tyrants. So it can be assumed that
I actually don't know where that comes from. I understood it, and I think that's what I'm hearing about, is that it was a restraining jacket. I don't know if that's a novelization, a movie, a lore entry, something you find in game. That's how I understood it too. I understood this and what Mr. X had as restraining jackets to help control mutations.
this trench coat was supposed to do the same thing before being heavily damaged by the explosion. Moving up the chest, we can see that the tyrant's vulnerabilities are still very much so present. The large secondary heart added comes out of the chest to take over the duties of the smaller human heart, meaning that the ribcage likely does not have a sternum present after the mutation. The muscle mass in this creature has also greatly increased, meaning that it is now even stronger than before. The arms are
The coats are also armored. I looked at, I like his helmet in 3 Remake. He's got a little helmet. The yellow parts on it kind of remind me of like Ofuda, like Japanese ceiling tags. They almost kind of remind me. I know that's not their intent. They're just kind of like, they look like little safety tags. But that's kind of the design that got across to me. It would not, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that these are also armored. It's trying to protect incoming threats, but it's also trying to control mutations.
Several feet in length and work more as legs now as the creature runs around in a quadrupedal feral state. Interestingly, these mutations appear to have the effect of decreasing the overall intelligence of this beast, so it makes it more aggressive, but at the cost of calculated thought. The head of the second stage appears strangely much more smooth and muscular. At this point, the skin appears to be much more stretched and kind of slimy looking, and the head has also grown to about the proportionate size of the body. The mouth has several teeth in it, more than it initially had, or at least that's the way it looks, but you can't deny that perfect smile. And you know what? This thing honestly looks like Alien from Alien if you get a good look at it.
It does look very Xenomorph-esque. I did say that. I did notice that. It's really not until this that I'm looking at the parallels between that and the LSCKER, because and it may be intentional, it may be unintentional. Like if you were to if it were to have actual skin covering it, and it were to have some further like bone growth, some further calcium growth, right? And it were to have its, I mean, we already covered its head being covered, right? Like it looks like that could be the T-Virus evolution. Very, very Xenomorph looking though, 100%. Anyone playing this, looking at this, will go, that looks very Xenomorph-esque.
Muscles on the face now get a powerful bite, presumably, should anyone get too close. And if you do get too close, it can basically rip off your entire face. So continuing with the mutations, originally having 2 arms, this creature ends up losing one after Jill drops a massive gate onto it, severing it. The creature rides around, but almost at a metabolically impossible healing time. No, wait, it's basically metabolically impossible because it would end up cooking itself. It grows a tentacle-like appendage and fires an infecting spike into Jill's arm to change her. Over time, the tentacle continues to grow and become strong enough to become its main offensive means. As the damage continues to mount, more was expected from the Nemesis's healing factor.
I mean, it could be possible that, I don't know, it's hard on that one, because like, yeah, metabolically impossible, it literally cooks itself at that rate, right? 100%. I wonder what length and what in what capacity the tentacle might exist prior to that. So yeah, like this is definitely one of those that can throw somebody out of the experience, 100%.
Being submerged in extremely corrosive chemicals, the body had to quickly divide and continue dividing, otherwise the cells would be eaten up entirely by the chemicals. This would eventually lead to the chemical mixture being more and more diluted, until ultimately the creature was able to overtake the chemical reaction and continue dividing cells into more numbers than it was actually burning, which meant that now it was on the positive side of building its body back up. Upon doing so, a new ability began to take hold. The third blobfish form I mentioned earlier, due to all the damage incurred from the acid bath, and this meant that no form was going to be taken, and instead it began to absorb those infected with the T-Virus around it, notably all the zombies and hunters that were present in the room after its bath. The
Right, yeah, because there were still remains and stuff down there.
Introduction of new cellular material, more T-virus, and the experiments associated with the hunters meant that all this combined ended up changing the Nemesis into a room-sized beast. Nemesis, sadly in this form, has no feet to start with, and instead has two large multi-segmented arms it uses to attack its target. Interestingly, it still has a head, which has grown into massive proportions, as likely this is the stronghold of the parasites, but it's now having multiple rows of teeth, and one bite from it, as to be expected, can
That kind of actually reminds me, its head right now kind of reminds me of the dead hand from Ocarina of Time.
instantly into human. This rapid growth, though, has created weak points on the body of blisters. Taking these out and damaging the creature opens up the ribcage, exposing the heart, but only by giving it the finger can you actually harm it. Eventually, Jill is able to overcome this constantly mutating beast by utilizing these experimental tools and blowing it apart. This is likely the end, as it takes out the stronghold of the parasites within the brainstem, but perhaps even given enough time, it may have recovered to some degree. However,
That's where my suspense of disbelief gets in there. There's a couple instances of this in Resident Evil, like Resident Evil 5. So with Resident Evil 4 Remake, we have emergent lore and understanding that the red-tipped rockets from the RPGs are nuclear, right? They're warheads. So we can logically go to Resident Evil 5 as it currently stands without a current remake as of reacting to this, right? And assume that the finale with Wesker in the lava being hit with two warheads took him out. However, my suspense of disbelief just completely just throws itself out the window because no one in there, Chris, Sheva, or Wesker, should be able to survive for that period of time next to lava that close, right? Just lava because on outside, magma inside, right? Lava specifically is the term I'm using. But it's like you're telling me that like a warhead was able to do this when he wasn't cooked or completely just disintegrated by the heat. So I look at Nemesis, and after going into 3 and looking at the finger, the railgun, being able to just blast it. I don't know. My sense of disbelief there is it took that much punishment prior to that, and that's what got it. But to be fair, that is a fair assessment to be like, oh yeah, no, this is clearly it could be the stronghold of the parasites even. It could already in 3 have taken enough damage and still not be in a stable enough state that any sort of catastrophic damage could be lethal to it. It would not have surprised me if Nemesis still did exist in some capacity, but I mean, it's going to have to work from the ground up for a lot of things, right? I don't know. My suspense of disbelief definitely gets tripped because it just goes through so much punishment. It's like Jill throughout the entirety of RE3 Remake survived explosion after traumatic hit after traumatic hit after explosion after explosion. And after a certain point, I'm like, good God, like how much punishment can she take? Like quite literally got absolutely just jostled around, blown up, smacked, fallen from stories. And it's just like, at what point are you actually going to stay down? Like, oh yeah, there's definitely like actual anatomical things that just don't quite add up and actually kind of yoink me out of it. I think Nemesis from 3 Remake and Wesker from 5 are prime examples of we don't really know if that's the end of them. I think there's a good argument, but the fact that there's even doubt because of how much punishment they take, you could chalk that up to potential poor writing. You could chalk that up to an unclear message. You could chalk that up to events happening in a way that doesn't quite convey the finale to the viewer. Absolutely.
However, a nuclear detonation completely vaporized the body entirely, leading it to its ultimate end. But one thing I did want to discuss before we wrap this up, and I talked about it earlier in a video, is the actual parasite. So just to recap, this is what separates a Nemesis from an actual T-103. These parasites not only have the ability to infect Jill through a shot to the arm, and can also infect Jill by completely latching onto her head, and I would have to assume it just takes her head off and then interfaces with the brainstem.
Probably.
But it can also be seen when Nemesis attaches the parasite to the head of an infected infected person with a T-virus. But let me know if you want like a more in-depth analysis on the parasites, because they also seem to greatly sort of resemble the Las Plagas. So now we got to get to the, let's call it just morbid curiosity that every human has. So how does a Nemesis take you out? Well, it really depends on the form. With the humanoid form, punching and a skull crush with a foot are pretty standard. It's also known to just pick you up and completely crush your head with its hands, or use tentacles that can go through your spinal cord and sever those connections. But when it punches you, imparting this much force can easily snap spines, cause internal hemorrhaging, as well as brain contusions and brain bleeding. But as this creature gets larger, simply by running into you or swiping you with claws can take you out. But it usually prefers to just jump on you and bite. And this remains the theme throughout the other interactions as well. When it turns into its blobfish form, if it's able to grab you, that's it, man. It's just one bite, and I assume it rips off like half your body. But I want to thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, leaving a like helps, and subbing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. Alright, so the purple channel is growing. If you want to check that out, I would be greatly appreciative, because I'm just trying to keep this thing moving, I guess. If not, well, that's alright too. I'll drop the links to that, as well as Discord, Twitter, Patreon, and my other channel links. And I would like to thank my patrons real quick. Huge shout out to our astronauts It's Not a Spoon and Trey Windall. Thank you guys for your massive support. And I would also like to thank Skilt, our lone scientist. And to the rest of my patrons, I really do appreciate your support during this time. It goes a long way towards keeping this channel up and running. And honestly, I couldn't do it without y'all. So alright, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.
I wonder why he says purple, because also there's other creators like Dragon Spit says purple channel as well. Is there an algorithm reason for that? Does it recognize the name of that and view it as some sort of competition, so therefore it doesn't push videos, or is it just what's the reason for it? I'm actually really curious. Inside joke. Okay, if it's an inside joke, totally. That yeah, I wasn't aware of that. But this was awesome. This was definitely a video where I feel after finally getting around to playing Resident Evil 3 Remake, I really enjoyed this. It was really cool to kind of look at Nemesis, kind of see how it improved on the Mr. X thing from 2, being able to kind of see some of the mutations, see how it kind of progressed, see some other insight on it. And even then, towards the end, he's talking about how the anti-alpha parasite kind of mirroring Las Plagas, kind of referencing Las Plagas in kind of a way, right, being similar in certain aspects. I think that that's intentional, especially now that 4 has been out since, 2004, and going into the remake, we have certain things that they're trying to build on or improve upon, right? I think that that's really interesting to look at from a design perspective, and wonder, are they doing this as a storytelling element, as kind of a, we're going to ladder this? I would disagree on the knowledge that, or I guess on the take stance, I guess, that all protagonists are immune, because we do see in RE6 there is actually a fail state where Leon and Helena can take in too much of the C virus from the gas expelling one, and then they just ganks them. So the way that I've always viewed it is that because Chris can quite literally punch boulders, Chris, I eat boulders for breakfast, Redfield, punches literal boulders that should shatter your hand. And we can argue, oh, that's just hyperbolic. That's just, it's whatever, right? It could be, boulder made of, graphite. I don't know. You could make arguments like that. But even then, Jill taking as much damage as she did, I was under the impression that she got infected in 3. I don't know enough about 1. It would make sense to me that everyone on Star's Alpha Team, everyone who, main character status, right? Jill, Leon, Chris, they're superhuman. They have beneficial effects from whatever virus they were exposed to, right? Mainly the T, right? Leon from Raccoon City, Jill and Chris going to be from the Arclay Mansion. I don't have anything to really provide a citation to that. I don't really have anything to really say this is why. That's kind of my headcanon on it. It would make a lot of things make a lot more sense. Obviously, they're still mortal. They're not quite Wesker status, but like they have a mild case of main character, right? Where Leon could just jump from some stuff. He can, do some impressive feats. Chris can punch boulders. Jill can absolutely, especially after conditioning and training with Wesker in 5, she's able to do some wild acrobatics. Very interesting to kind of see. So that was very awesome to see. We will use this probably as the last in the 2024 Spooktober. So if you see this, this is probably the last for 2024 Spooktober. I love Roanoke, love what he does. He does have a second channel, which I'll try to remember to link down in the description. I love what he does. Horror content like this doesn't necessarily do the best. So as much as stuff like this interests me, and it's very fascinating to see his viewpoint and perspectives on it, unfortunately, it's just one of those that I react to sometimes as kind of a passion project. But I do recommend that you absolutely go and check him out. We need more people like Roanoke, just providing science, citations, facts, discussion, commentary on stuff like this, because I think this is absolute peak content, especially for series that I love. But thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. Definitely go check him out. Links in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.